JD Vance continues to be MAGA weird. President Biden is going hard for SCOTUS reform, and cats are fighting back. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. There are 98 days until I don't think there's an adjective to describe just how consequential the upcoming 2024 president election is, but we're in the double digit, folks. It is so good to be back. Thank you, Jen Tao, for filling in for me last week. Thanks to all of the nerds who showed up. It's just bad timing. It serves me right for making plans 4 months ahead of time. I will never do that again, ever. At least not until this election is over, which hopefully will be tomorrow, because, oh my goodness, how can we sustain this insanity? It has been a wild ride. It continues to be, but I have to say, Waj, that I'm kind of liking the narrative thus far. So I want to talk today definitely about President Biden and his play for SCOTUS reform, what it means, whether or not we think it goes far enough, but also the energy behind Vice President Harris, the impeccable rollout, especially considering that it happened under the most extreme adverse conditions. The way the right has been completely wrong-footed, which makes me happy. That the fascinating Veep stakes, and of course, MAGA weird, which I think is something that we need to grasp onto and expand as an attack. But watch, let's start with SCOTUS. I want to play a clip from President Biden, who was at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Library yesterday. He had written an op-ed that was published in the Washington Post already, but this was his first speech in which he discussed his ideas for SCOTUS reform. The first one is the idea to have a constitutional amendment that does not allow for presidential immunity. The third one is ethics reform, and the second one is in this clip, so let's play that now.
We've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well. In fact, the United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats in their high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for the court's nomination more predictable and less arbitrary. Reduce the chance that any single presidency imposes undue influence in generations to come. The bipartisan commission I convened analyzed various term limit structures. Based on their report, I believe the best structure is the 18-year term limit. That would help ensure the country would not have what it has now: an extreme court that's the product of an attack on the confirmation process that's been weaponized by those seeking to carry out an extreme agenda for decades to come. By the way, these guys mean it. These guys mean it. Project 2025 is real.
Okay, Watch. The reason I picked that clip as opposed to the other two clips about his other two ideas for reform is because he did a couple of things. One, he made it clear how we, the United States, are an outlier
Mhm.
in terms of not having term limits for people on the highest court. And actually, the same is true for federal court justices as well, judges as well. Also, which, just as a quick aside, I think we need to do with the Electoral College someday. Secondly, he kind of underscored with the idea of term limits how obscene it is that in one term, a guy who didn't even win the popular vote got to appoint 3 justices.
Yep.
And that they can have a negative, deleterious impact on generations to come, which makes no sense. And third, he nailed it by mentioning Project 2025. I just want to know your thoughts about his reforms and whether or not you think this is something that we can do, and if he should have gone further.
I have prepared for this.
All right.
So allow me. I'm very excited about this. First and foremost, I give credit where credit's due. I criticize when necessary. Give credit to President Biden, an institutionalist who, for a couple of years, as we have been saying, kind of dragged his feet on this, but finally has done the right thing with 3 months left to go in his presidency, that he will be, I think, remembered as the president who pushed, finally, a mainstream conversation about Supreme Court reform. His 3 stances, right? No one's above the law, the constitutional amendment, which is very difficult for those who don't know the rules. You need 2/3 of the House and Senate, so a near impossibility. That being said, it's okay, because by leading off with that, what he's telling you and reminding you is that this Supreme Court is a rogue, extremist, authoritarian court that is against the majority of the country. He reminds you that this Supreme Court, there are no moderates left. That BS about Roberts being a moderate, it used to kill me. There's no moderates. In a 6-3 decision, this court gift-wrapped a present to future dictator Donald, which inshallah won't happen, by giving him absolute immunity for official acts and thereby holding him not accountable for the 88 criminal indictments. So with that as the peg, putting it right there in the center, reminding people, hey, no one's above the law in the United States of America, which is something that a majority of Americans agree on. He then leads with 2 very doable reforms, which, by the way, have the approval of 75% of Americans. Number 2, term limits. When you tell Americans, why are a bunch of unelected officials sitting on the Supreme Court until they can die or be immobile or retire? You know, presidents serve 4 years, senators serve 6 years, the House of Representatives serves 2 years. These extremists can sit there for life. That doesn't sound right. 75% of Americans say, good point. And then the third one is an enforceable code of ethics. Why is anyone above the law? Why are these Supreme Court justices sitting with black robes who are beholden to right-wing billionaires who groom them for cases in which there'll be deregulation and we take our freedoms back to the 19th century? How come they're above the law? How come Justice Thomas can get yacht trips and gifts? How come Alito can be lavished with gifts? How can their spouses support violent insurrectionists and they don't recuse themselves? 75% of Americans say, yeah, no one's above the law. It's this theme, right? It's this brilliant theme, which is encapsulated by this rogue Supreme Court. And what I've been saying, and I think most of the Nerd Avengers have been saying, is Democrats should run on this. They should run on this. And what becomes impossible, Mary, right? Oftentimes, the reason why this is so important, the way human psychology works, it's impossible. It'll never happen. America will never vote for a black female president until it happens. It is impossible. These gays getting married, not in my lifetime, until it happens. I have the gray hairs. I remember in 2008, folks, Obama wasn't for marriage equality until it becomes a reality. Fight for a living wage, you radicals and leftists. It'll never happen until it happens. So President Biden saying this, even though it is very tough to do right now, and we could talk about the enforcement very quickly, he will need to, Mary, wait for it. And I think I'm glad he doesn't say this, because the enforcement comes to another major reform. Are you ready for it, folks? Get rid of the filibuster. Get rid of the filibuster, because it requires 60 votes. You're not going to get 60 votes. But if you change the rules, you'd get a slight majority, 50-50, vice president as the deal breaker, or 51. And now you campaign on it. Give us the presidency, let us retain the Senate, and give us the House. And then we'll do Supreme Court reform, because these mother effers will stay here for another 20 years. And do you want the next president to choose potentially 2 Supreme Court justices who will take away contraception, who will go after marriage equality? Come on. This is common sense, folks. Give us the Senate, the House, the presidency. We'll do these reforms. We'll have accountability. We'll go against the criminals. We'll restore democracy. Mwah. And the final thing I'll say is the next step is expanding the court. So you prime them with this. You massage it. You get it mainstream. This is now as mainstream as possible. You have the Judiciary Act, which allows for the expansion of the court, which has 60 members of Congress, including Senator Whitehouse and Elizabeth Warren. And then, inshallah, you win. You get rid of the filibuster. You implement this. You expand the court. That is my plan. Sorry for my little TED talk. I was very excited.
No. It's, I mean, it's all good. And Jen Rubin, that was the one thing that I thought was missing, the idea of expanding the court, which I'd love to hear your opinion about. But first, I did want to underscore a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to see what the mechanism for all of this is. Secondly, in discussing the constitutional amendment, what President Biden is making explicit here is that only corrupt people in that position of power will take advantage of immunity. And that's what this illegitimate, corrupt supermajority in the Supreme Court did. They made it easier for criminals to commit crimes while holding on to the belief that decent people like President Biden, who believe in institutions and who believe in limited power, won't take advantage. So I thought that was excellent. But just your thoughts in general. How do you think this plays out? And did it, as Waj suggested, was it a good move not to go to court expansion just yet?
Well, first of all, on the constitutional amendment, I would love to see that debate on the House and Senate floor. No, we're in favor of criminal immunity for presidents. No, we're not. Let them have that debate and expose that Republicans are no longer in favor of democracy. These principles, like everyone is obligated to obey the law, they don't believe in anymore. So I think this is a good opportunity well before the election to have that conversation. Who in their right mind, other than Republicans, thinks it's a good idea to allow presidents to commit crimes? And even worse, under the formulation that the Supreme Court has laid out, all they need to do is sprinkle the official act holy water and they can practically do whatever they want. So that part, I think, is very strong. I think ultimately, term limits are a knotty problem. I agree with them. I think they are absolutely necessary. As a statutory matter, they're going to be controversial, and this Supreme Court is going to rule on them, whether they're legitimate or not, should they pass. But that's why I think you hold back on the expansion of the court. Let this Supreme Court or some other variation of them rule out term limits. Then the population will be in a complete uproar, and you will have the argument that there's no alternative but to expand the court. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, by the way. I think you should keep the term limits and expand the court. They get at two different problems. And one thing that the 18-year term limits gets at is it hopefully makes these things, first of all, less hyper political, less partisan. You're not fighting for the next 40 years. You're fighting for 18 years, as important as that may be. And also you get out of the habit of hiring the youngest ludicrous person you can find, because with an 18-year term limit, why not put a 50-year-old who's actually been around the block a few times and has actually, has some real judicial experience. So there are lots of things to like about the 18-year term limit. I think Kamala Harris was right to come right out and out of the box and say she favors these things. I think she should run on this. I think we have to be able to put these two things together for the American people. Project 2025 and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court enables 2025, and 2025 is what follows when you allow the executive practically unlimited power. So they're one and the same. And I think Harris, as a prosecutor, as a lawyer, as someone who sat on the judiciary, is really well equipped, to make this case. And by the way, I also think, and I don't know why the Biden administration hasn't done it, that she should run in general on draining the swamp. The Biden administration did next to nothing in terms of executive reforms. They didn't put teeth on the Emoluments Act. They didn't put teeth on the Hatch Act. They didn't bar lobbyists from the revolving door. There's lots of things that they could have done. Granted, they had priorities that they couldn't do everything. But why not run on that? Trump is the swampiest of the swamp characters, the most corrupt president of all. Why not make that a central feature? It's not just the Supreme Court that has to be reformed, it's the entire government. And oh, by the way, why don't we work on Congress as well? Why are lobbyists allowed to fundraise for members of Congress? Why are members allowed to receive donations from people who come before their committees? So run on reform, run on the corrupt, sleazy Republicans. And I think that's a winning issue for a lot of people, particularly independents who have kind of lost faith in government.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's any issue that the Democrats will run on that won't be a winning issue because the Republicans are just terrible. And, I'm willing to give the Biden administration a bit of a pass here. They didn't invent this stuff. No other administration has addressed any of that. And they did kind of have their hands full because it was probably the worst hand dealt to a president in modern American history. But Brian, I wanted to get back to this idea of tying court reform to the Republican agenda and Project 2025, and how vitally important it is for people finally to understand that the court, not just that it should be an issue, but why it should be an issue. So walk us through, if you would, how you think this plays out in an election season when there's still a lot of questions. Like, for example, 18-year age limit's great, but when does that start? Is that grandfathered? Or can we get rid of people who have already been on the court for that long and much longer? Like, how does it work? When does the clock start?
Well, that would be all up for discussion. First of all, I'm coming to you from the George Soros deep state Trump cult member status that I was accused of this morning, and I'm still trying to figure out. Thank you. First thing, to put it in perspective, and Jen Rubin did it very succinctly, and this is the thing that you cannot forget. Project 2025 and SCOTUS are linked. They are, in fact, SCOTUS is already implementing elements of Project 2025 and have. So you've got to separate that. And to do that, Supreme Court reform is needed. It's going to be discussed. If it's wonderful that the president brought it up. What we need to see is more detail of how to do it. For example, Waz, you were talking about, Project 2025 and the filibuster. Look, if you're going to eliminate filibusters, that's a time-honored tradition. I don't know if you'll get the Congress, particularly the Senate, to do that. But the cloture part of it, and what happened after 1970 when it became routine, filibuster used to mean you had to stand up and actually filibuster, talk. Now you can just say, I filibuster. And if you take it back to what it was prior to 1970, and folks remember the reason why they changed those rules to make it easier to filibuster is because civil rights actions were enacted in the 60s that drove the far right crazy. And much of what you're seeing today out of Project 2025, the fight against filibuster, Bill Barr comes out and says, look, they want to purge members of the far right from the ranks of SCOTUS. Yeah, exactly right. Bill Barr, you are the far right. You are the Catholic League. The Catholic League is probably behind 6 of those conservative Catholics. It began in 73. It was an outgrowth of a lot of far right Catholic groups that have been around for a while. That group is responsible. I hate to say it, being born and raised Catholic, but behind all of this is the specter of the American Taliban, the far right Catholic movement. And until we deal with that, we've got to bring that out in the open. So what you're looking at in short, to shorten it all up, is when it's brought before Congress, there has to be specific goals in mind, specific different policies to enact. They will argue about it in Congress. Most of the members of Congress that I've spoken with since his, and I'm up to around 35 on Republicans and Democrats, and some of the extreme on both ends. Both of them, both sides are for Supreme Court reform, if done correctly, because the far right fears what would happen if the far left got a hold of the Supreme Court as they have a hold of it now. And the far left is, and well, everybody else in the nation, I won't say far, but everyone in the nation is concerned about the fact that the far right has control of it now. So there is common ground. But what you're going to have to do, this is going to be like, nobody wants to see sausages made, and nobody wants to see how this is going to go down in Congress, or if it does. But I would love to see that debate on the floor at any time soon would be nice. And finally, I would say if you're going to reform anything, I urge the President of the United States to take on one other reform, and that's reform the press. He could do this by simply standing up and saying, I want to reinstitute the fairness doctrine through the FCC. I want to bust up. He's always been for unions. He's always been for the common man. Bust up the media monopolies. I pray. I've been after them for 3.5 years to do this. This is his time to do that. So in my final analysis, if you're going to make a change, because people no longer believe vetted facts, and that's our fault, and that's because politicians made that possible, beginning with Ronald Reagan. So if you're going to reform the Supreme Court, you've got to reform information gathering, and that's the press.
Yeah, and Danielle, there's so much there to talk about, and as we get closer to the election, we'll have to try to cover as much of it as we can. I kind of want to stay focused on the Supreme Court for a couple more minutes, but I believe that the filibuster has been abused to the extent that it's unrecognizable, and it should be gotten rid of, because right now the Senate is an anti-democratic institution, and that seems weird to me, just like the electoral colleges. As for media reform, obviously when you have one person owning the most powerful and influential media platform in Twitter, who is putting his thumb on the scale for the bad guys, that's a problem. And I would like to think that somebody thinks that should be reformed. But just quickly to get back to the Supreme Court, curious to know what your thoughts are, and how do we keep this in the conversation? How do we keep it relevant? Because again, to me, it seems like it's related to every issue that matters to Democrats, and especially young people.
I think that the steps that President Biden took with his op-ed and with his policy outline is something that we have long since called for, right? As we have seen the weaponized Supreme Court just take away right after right after right, and we see headline that shows grift after grift after grift. I think that a lot of people before this statement, and I mean people in general, not those that are in the legal profession and academia who understand the ins and outs of the Supreme Court, I think a lot of people had resigned themselves to the fact that, well, nothing can be done. That this is just the life that we have to live, and we're kind of under the eye, if you will, of these black robes. And what President Biden did with this kind of rollout with these reforms is say no. Like these things are possible. Like we can have enforceable ethics rules, right? Like you have ethics rules inside of elementary school classrooms. You have ethics rules, everywhere that you go. But as it pertains to the Supreme Court, you can do whatever it is that you want. When you say that we should have term limits, and I was curious about the 18 years, but now I'm starting to understand it. I'm not a lawyer at all. But now I'm understanding why 18 years, why not 20, why not, match it with the amount of years that a president can serve. And I think that those things are important. And I think that the things that were lifted up that pretty much, in 49 of 50 states, that everyone has term limits except for the Supreme Court. So it was laid out in a way that I think that most people could digest and understand. And it's important. I think that Vice President Kamala Harris coming out and saying that she agrees with this is important. And all of the things that Waj had laid out from the top, like this is where you start. And then you move into a place of expansion. I think that a lot of people sometimes want to put the cart before the horse, which is just like expand, 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 and don't understand all of the steps that need to happen before we get to that place. So what this offered, I think, was a sense of possibility that all is not lost and that the people still have a voice in how we move forward with a Supreme Court that is representative of the population and of the wants of the American people, and not just the whims and the desires and the backing, the billionaire backing of a few of the Supreme Court members. So I think that what Joe Biden is going to show us over the next 6 months is a lot of gravitas, a lot of courage that we hadn't seen before. And I think that more and more, I mean, it's only been a week plus since this seismic shift, but I think since then, we have seen this renewed not only vigor in the Harris campaign, but also in Biden himself, right? Like the kind of shackles and restraints are falling off, and that's something that Democrats have long since wanted to see, not with their candidates and their leaders. Like, let's do this. Like, let's march forward.
Yeah, and it's really good to see the contrast between President Biden and Democrats unbound versus the Republicans unbound. First of all, I just really quickly want to say welcome back, Danielle. You look very British. So I hope you had fun.
Thank you.
Jen, I want to shift gears because that's a good lead into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the fact that Donald Trump very openly said in, I don't know if it was a speech or a rally, who can tell the difference really, in which he made it very clear that if he gets back into the Oval Office, there won't be any more elections. He wasn't joking, as per Tom Cotton. He wasn't, what did Lindsey Graham say? Oh, he wasn't saying that. He was talking about unifying the country and passing the torch to the next generation. None of those words came out of Donald's mouth. So, once again, and the media, there was an article in the Washington Post that actually was like, well, Democrats say this and Republicans say this. Like, why don't you just look at what the guy actually said? So just so there's no ambiguity here, let's play this clip from Donald being interviewed by, I don't know, somebody on Fox.
Attacking you for other ridiculous reasons. They're saying that you said to a crowd of Christians that they won't have to vote in the future.
Yeah, let me say what did I mean by that. I had a tremendous crowd speaking to Christians. I mean, this was a crowd that liked me a lot. I think I'm at 97% or something. And they're treated very badly by this administration, okay? Catholics are treated unbelievably. They're like persecuted. And if I might say, before I go into the other, Jewish people, if you're Jewish and you vote for Biden or the Democrats or Kamala or whoever's going to run, I guess it's going to be her. But if you...
First of all, it's Kamala, you creep. Really vice president to you, Donald. Secondly, he didn't answer the question because somebody got through to, I mean, maybe he does. I don't know. Do you guys really want to be subjected to this bullshit anymore? I mean, basically, he didn't answer the question right away. It's a very simple yes or no question. You don't go off on some psychotic tirade about the persecution of Christians in America or, anti-Semitism. Because by saying that, any Jew who votes for a Democrat is insane. I mean, I don't know. I'm just so tired of this. The thirstiness, the greediness for attention and ratings and whatever. Although, as some of you pointed out, at least his ear grew back. I've heard it referred to on Twitter as miracle ear. But I don't know, Jen.
Yes.
Which is one, do you want me to keep playing this clip? And two, what do you make of this? Don't we have enough proof at this point that yes, you should take him at his word, unless he's obviously lying, and stop translating him for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, Mary, the metaphor I'm thinking of now is this. I mean, Donald Trump has been absolutely clear. There is no ambiguity in what he's saying. It's black and white, and it is in flashing letters. And people are trying to pretend that his speech is like a green screen upon which you can project whatever background or context you would like. And it is not. And he is not even erasing his words.
And Jen, I just want to interrupt really quickly because it's such an important point. A green screen people project on, but it's always to bail him out.
Right.
That's the part I just don't get. Yeah, I get it from people like Laura Ingraham or any, Fox, for anybody on Fox or any Republican. I don't get it from publications like the Washington Post or the New York Times. I just do not.
What he is saying is perfectly in line with what he did in 2020. He tried to dismiss and have Mike Pence throw away the votes of the Electoral College by not counting them. And before that, he did every other possible thing in his power to try to interfere in the peaceful transition of authority from him to the Biden-Harris administration. And we know that he even called the Georgia Secretary of State and said, could you find me whatever it was, 11,700 odd votes, because that would have swung Georgia to him. I don't know what in the world people think he means when he says, we'll fix it real good. Some people are saying, oh, what he means is he'll make the policy so good that people won't need to vote. No.
And why would people not need to vote if just because things are better?
Also, this is the same guy who over the weekend said a criminal is a criminal and they stay criminal and we don't have time to figure it out. People, he is not going to change. I expected better of the press than a Susan Collins answer. Okay, we are in deep trouble. It doesn't matter how much energy we have. The Republicans are going to plot when Kamala Harris wins to try to throw out the votes. We know that. We're working on that. But the idea that the press knows that that's what's in the works, and they've seen what Donald Trump did, and he's still supporting the big lie. The fact that that is the backdrop for his comments, all of their 8th grade English grammar teachers should be on the phone with them, taking away their license to broadcast because they don't know. I know they probably never like diagramming sentences. Fine. I love that.
I hate diagramming sentences. So that I don't want to have anything in common with.
No.
Nerds!
This is not Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. This is not the lost.
Excellent reference.
You friggin' nerd.
I've got more.
I'm trying to out-nerd us today.
This is, I'm going to go deeper. This is not the lost language of the Indus Valley civilization.
Move along.
Okay. This is Donald Trump saying what he's going to do, and he will fulfill it because the only promises that he has ever fulfilled is he's promised to take away abortion. He's promised through his Supreme Court choices, he did that. He promised to lower taxes on the rich. And he said to the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. For F's sake, people.
Oh, but that's not what he meant.
Okay. That's what I have to say.
Yeah.
Why did no one at that debate say, what the hell are you doing here? You tried to overthrow the government. Why are you back running for president?
Listen, I agree, Jen. I mean, listen, that's what I hope happens. Part of me, a bit of like the majority of me, to the extent that one could split oneself up in that way, did not want President Biden to debate him at all because it legitimized a traitor to this country. And I don't think that should have happened. But here we are. So hopefully there will be another debate, which we'll talk about. But I just want to wrap this piece up with Brian and then move on to Veep stakes, which are shockingly exciting.
Well, let's see. I will quote I will quote Ulysses. You keep running away and running into yourself. There you go, Waj, just for you, brother. That's what Donald Trump keeps doing. He keeps trying to escape and runs into himself. Look, if you're gonna listen to Donald Trump, I want to remind people of two questions I asked him in the Brady briefing room. First, do you take any responsibility for the death of Kobe? Actually, that was out on the Rose Garden. He said, I take absolutely no responsibility. And he got pissed off at me for asking the question and did one of these at me. Then 6 weeks before the election, we knew what Donald Trump was about because he said he would not accept a peaceful transfer of power. Listen to what the man says. And as someone far wiser than me said, when someone tells you who they are, listen. Donald Trump is all about making sure that he takes care of Donald Trump. We know this. We know this. And to transition, Mary, into what you're saying, we got to find a VP candidate on the Democratic side who can assist those who don't think Donald Trump is as evil as he is, give them an excuse to vote for the Democrats. So
Yeah, I mean, Waj, obviously, it's going to be really easy to be less terrible than the Republican pick for vice president. It's got to be the worst ticket in American history, and it was even before Vance was picked. But one of the most fascinating things about this Veep stakes, and usually they're pretty boring, even though we kind of know because America is such a damaged, limited place that it's going to be a white guy. It's still really exciting because it reminds us just what a deep bench Democrats have, because a lot of the people we're not even talking about because they just don't fit the demographic for these circumstances, there's a ton of them too.
Yeah, another topic that I have been prepared for and excited about, God bless, as Jen Rubin just said in her chat, DEI for white guys, the magical whites. And we have a very deep bench. And what I've said before, and I'll say again, that I will take Kamala Harris and a coconut tree for a ticket against Trump and Vance. But we don't need a coconut tree because we have a deep bench. And let's just break it down real quick, right? Whoever she goes with, there's strengths, there's minuses. I have my particular pick, which I will share with you. But we have to rally behind this ticket. And just know that whoever she picks of this bench that we will discuss, infinitely better than Trump and Vance, right? For their policies, for their record, for what they'll do for our democracy.
Well,
now,
I just want to make something very, very clear. There is a subterranean kind of subversive Trump Vance ticket in the offing. I can't say too much about it, but there is a Trump and a Vance. Who is not Donald and not JD, and we're working on something. So just to keep you posted, I mean, just to tease that a little bit, you'll probably be able to guess who the Trump is.
I can.
Anyway,
does it rhyme with Larry?
I think that would be giving away a little bit too much.
Does it rhyme with voice?
Perhaps.
Larry and voice. Okay, that was a perfect tease. But what I will say with this, with that caveat given, right, that, and I mean this literally, I will take Kamala and a coconut tree, and the bench is deep. To quote, since we did Finnegan's Wake, and we did Ulysses, to quote Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, James Joyce said, "You can still die when the sun is shining," and the sun is shining. But here is a pick. Two picks that have been bandied about that I would say, Mary, will dampen some enthusiasm, if I may, real quick. Shapiro, very strong, governor of Pennsylvania, young, exuberant. Pennsylvania loves him. Problem with Shapiro, and I hope Democrats pay attention to this, is you need voter enthusiasm. And I was at the AFT conference last week, the American Federation of Teachers. It's a big union, and they're not behind Shapiro. Why? Two reasons why. And it wasn't just Arabs and Muslims and teachers. I'm talking about, several grassroots leaders of ethnicities remembered his kind of really hard crackdown on the pro-ceasefire protesters, referring to them as the KKK, and also his support for school vouchers. And if you don't know anything about vouchers, this has been an attempt by the right wing, one of their many attempts for the past 70 years to attack public schools. So teachers are like, pro-vouchers, and a lot of grassroots progressives are like the attack, the kind of unnecessary attack and crackdown on these protesters. They haven't forgotten. So you will dampen enthusiasm, I think, on a national level going for Shapiro, and also with Kelly. Yes, astronaut, great pick, border state, husband of Gabby Giffords, but also same thing, kind of a bit harsh on the unions, even though he did a backtrack recently as of last week. He also attended Netanyahu's speech, giving a standing ovation. I'm telling you, with voter enthusiasm, this hurts. Who
Yeah.
I like of the group that's left, Cooper just put himself out. Whitmer, apparently you can't have her because too much ovaries in America if you have two women.
Way too many.
Buttigieg, he is the gay, and apparently, even though he's so qualified, the best communicator in the Democratic Party, a great pick. It's too soon for a black woman and a gay on a national ticket, but I think his future is very bright. I really like Tim Walz and Bashir. Walz is a teacher, a veteran, came from a rural community, 400 people, gun owner, did a 180 on the NRA, has been the best messenger in the past 2 weeks. His Midwestern nice has really cut through, given Harris an amazing campaign. Weird as F is trending right now. And I think he does what a vice president candidate does. You're supposed to compliment the president, and then you're also supposed to help addition. What does he or she bring that can add? Tim Walz can go talk to these whites, to folks, who are on the fence, and be like, I'm one of you. These guys are weird. Another guy is Andy Bashir, young, won as governor, runs as a progressive, really good at messaging, has that Southern drawl. These two, to me, are the most attractive candidates. But what I will say again, I'll end it, is whoever she picks, infinitely better than J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. And Democrats should be really, really excited about this. And whoever is the pick, get behind it.
Yeah, I just want to say really quickly. I mean, obviously, Pete Buttigieg has his fan club, and I think he's too young. I do not think he's as qualified as these other people at all. I mean, let's remember the guy got like 8,000 votes in a statewide race before he ran for president. So, I think we need a little bit more experience.
Give him a few years. Yeah.
Yeah, give him a few years. And Jen Rubin, I agree for the most part with Waj's assessment. And what I'd add to somebody, and I know that Mark Kelly brings a lot of gravitas and experience, and his resume is impeccable. But in addition to some of his a little bit too conservative for Democrats liking positions on certain things, he's not particularly dynamic. And I know that generally speaking, that shouldn't matter, but here we are in America in 2024, and apparently energy is a thing that people really like. I think we need somebody who can make the case. And I'm not sure that Mark Kelly is it. Plus, I don't want another open seat in Arizona Senate seat.
Right. And, Wash is right. Each one of these guys has a little something that you would prefer. On
Everybody
Shapiro's
does,
side, he has a 61% approval rating in Pennsylvania. There's a new poll out today showing Kamala Harris slightly ahead in Pennsylvania. So if you could lock down Pennsylvania, that would be huge. But as I said, there are strong, weak characterizations. I'm going to say something kind of controversial because I'm going to write about it later in the week. I don't like the weird characterization. I think that is too flippant. It minimizes the threat of Trump. It tells people you don't have to be so worried. Isn't it cute? Isn't it funny? I don't like it. But be that as it may, I think Walz is a very good communicator for all of the reasons that Waj said. And I also think it doesn't matter all that much. We are assigning great importance. Unless the person is really, really bad, see Vance, usually vice presidents don't matter. And in this case, they really won't, because Kamala Harris is so dynamic, is so enthusiastic, is her own attack dog. She doesn't need someone to make the case for Donald Trump so she can be Miss Nice. She's Miss Aggressive. She is already calling him, the con and the predator. So frankly, any of these guys kind of fine with me. There's not a clinker. And I have to say, unlike the Republicans, both the top and the bottom of the ticket, who should never go through the Oval Office. Any one of these people in a moment could become president of the United States. And if Biden had decided not to run, they would have been in a primary fight with Kamala Harris. So they are fully qualified people. They're all good Democrats. They're all super pro-choice, which is absolutely critical. And they know how to make the case against Donald Trump. So I'm sort of like, whatever you like, whoever you go with.
I want to move on to the weird issue. But first, I am actually curious. So Jen Rubin, you're sort of neutral. Whoever it is for VP is fine with you. Okay, Jen Taub, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I do. At this point, I'm feeling Tim Walz because I'm a Midwesterner. He's a Minnesotan. He's got that Minnesota nice thing going on. And I have been very impressed in the way he is not timid about progressive values, that he knows how to speak to the way all of us feel on a daily basis about the weird stuff and the freedom stealing that the Republican Party is pushing at us. He doesn't apologize. He embraces this stuff, and he's had a lot of executive experience. He was also in the Congress, so he knows how that runs. And my God, the guy was a school teacher. Anyone who can deal with that can deal with Congress. But in all seriousness, he's a natural communicator. And I do like his formulation of weird. I think Ruth Ben-Ghiat does too, because
Jen, we're going to have that conversation. I literally just wanted to know who your VP pick was.
That is my person.
All right, Danielle? Just curious about
my
your VP
person
pick.
or the weird.
Your VP pick, and then we're going to get to weird in a minute.
Okay. So my VP pick, I'm kind of torn, actually. This is what I'll say. Shapiro should stay in Pennsylvania because I think that we need the governor to stay in the governorship as we go through this election, given what we saw transpire with MAGA and the courts and, not approving electoral ballots and all of that. So Shapiro should stay in Pennsylvania. Other than that, I like him, right? I think Bashir is great, but I don't think that Bashir really gets us anything. He's not going to get us the state of Kentucky. And he should, again, stay governor in Kentucky because I don't know what Democrat is coming behind him. So stay there. So for me, I liked Kelly. And I liked Kelly because astronaut, military background. I liked him because of husband of Gabby Giffords, their stance on gun reform. And what have you. I know the Netanyahu issue. I know the labor issue over there. But that being said, I like that he's in the running. I am new to Waltz. And what I see so far, I like a lot. I love a former teacher. I'm a former teacher. I love the fact that he has won multiple times when he was in Congress in a red rural district. I think that that's amazing. I love the plain way that he speaks. People seem to like that. It's a contrast between the liberal California elite kind of monicum when you have a red state white guy be able to kind of go out there and just speak very plainly to the people. So, the thing is, y'all, is that we have an embarrassment of riches. And I think that, and I think that that's something that can't be said enough, that, Republicans have, the evil Teddy Ruxpin and an anti-woman, incel. And we have a crop of really, I think, palpable people to America that stand for women's rights, LGBTQ rights, progressives across the span. So I think that whoever she picks, I'll just say, like, it's not gonna change my passion for the ticket and for our freedom. So
right. Brian, I just want a name. Who's your pick? And then we're gonna move on.
Mark Kelly or Waltz.
Okay.
And I just pissed off Uncle David, who's senior advisor to Bashir, but sorry, Dave.
No, I mean, I agree with Danielle's assessment, pretty much. I'm leaning towards Tim Walz, but I don't care, because we're so much better than the other guys. So let's get down to MAGA weird, shall we? Now, there's weird, and then there's MAGA weird. As I've been saying, almost all of the people I most like in the world are weird. I don't particularly like myself most of the time, but I too am weird.
Well, we love you.
Thank you so much. Like, weird is a good thing. Like, creative people are weird. Interesting people are weird. Like, people who get obsessed about things like James Joyce novels and quote them endlessly on live YouTube shows, for example. I say that with love. I love that.
And
I love
short story collections.
People who can quote every lyric to Jesus Christ Superstar or any Stephen Sondheim musical, who know the difference between the Kelvin timeline and the Prime Universe, who could talk for hours about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Weird is amazing. Or who have every single poem by the British Romantic poets memorized to the extent that their families worry about them. That's amazing. That's weird. That's cool. That's awesome. It's not the kind of weird we're talking about here. We're talking about the creepy, off-putting, makes your skin crawl because you know there's something deeply wrong with that person who's obsessing about controlling women's bodies, who believes in something like menstrual surveillance, who can't let go of the whole idea that he thinks childless people are psychopaths or that animals are problematic in some way. Like, that's the kind of weird. So to Jen Rubin's point, what I would say is the reason I think it's effective, and I'm certainly not the only person saying this, is because people get it. People get, like, they know the difference between, hey, you're cool, weird, and / weird, versus you're a freaking creep, and I don't want to be trapped in an alley with you after dark or even during daylight hours, right? So I think it works because it's not the only thing we're doing, and it just resonates with people in a way, like the really big ideological issues like democracy and fascism don't necessarily, because they're so big and they take explanation, and you can't be pithy about it necessarily. So go ahead, Jen.
I actually have a piece that's pretty balanced that makes exactly those points, but I just say it's a two-edged sword. On one hand, you've captured a certain zeitgeist. People who aren't political can relate to it. They confirm it with everything they do because they're so gross that it is seems to be sort of catching fire, that it freaks them out. But, and this is the but, our entire politics have become so frivolous. It's become so cynical, so entertainment friendly. At the time that many of us are shouting from the rooftops, our democracy is in peril. Autocracy is coming. The biggest problem is not weird. It's not weird to ban women from having abortions. It's cruel. It's not weird to lock up people, millions of people in concentration camps. It's an abomination. It's not weird to give taxes to the rich. It's insanely counterproductive. So I am torn because on one hand, it's a marketing thing. It's clever. It's a meme, what have you. I get concerned when it tends to crowd out the important message, which is 5-alarm fire, this guy. And because people come back to people like me and say, oh, you're catastrophizing, you're hysterical. He doesn't mean all that totalitarianism stuff. He's just odd. He's just weird. He just says these things. That's the concern that I have.
Okay, there's a clip that I totally forgot to play. So I'm going to play it. And then I want to get a response to that because I share the concern, but. So let's just listen to...
resorting to some wild lies about my record, and some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird. And you may have seen he just pulled out of our debate. Yeah. Right? I hope he reconsiders, because we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So first of, I mean, not most importantly, but firstly, I think it's important to tag, especially Donald, with this because so much normalization has been done around him. Let's please focus on just a bizarre friggin' person he is. He's so bizarre. He's so unrelatable. There's something really wrong with him. And that's MAGA weird. That's not like harmless weird, right? So, Waj, I think what I understand about Jen's concerns is you don't want to trivialize it. You don't want to overuse it. And you certainly don't want to act because, mass murder, mass incarceration, those things are not weird. They're abhorrent and unspeakable, right? So we don't want to confuse the issues. But Josh Marshall wrote a piece about this in Talking Points Memo a few days ago. And his point, because he's on Team Weird, as am I, but his point was a campaign isn't one thing. Now, use this because it resonates with people, but it's like a band, okay? You've got two guitars, you've got a bass, you've got drums, you've got keyboards, and you play them all together. And sometimes, somebody gets a solo. Right now, MAGA Weird is having its moment, although I think I'm the only person I've heard refer to it as MAGA Weird, but I think we need to trademark that. And sometimes, it's we're going to focus on the authoritarianism and the fascism and the cruelty, as we should do. But let's use everything against these people. Let's use whatever is working. Be careful. It can be a double-edged sword. You don't want to make this campaign about they're weird. No, that's not effective. Be strategic. So where do you come down here, and what's your sort of prescription to like stay in the lane so we don't go overboard?
If I may, we have 3 minutes left, and I've talked a lot. You want to go to Danielle and Brian, and if we have time, I could just do it on the end, real quick.
Danielle.
Waj, you're such a gentleman. It's so lovely.
What's up with that?
He's not even a white dude.
I know. So I think, like, here's the thing. I think that this messaging is important and matters. As somebody who has spent a lot of time trying to convince people about Project 2025 and the cruelty of it, and has used the doom and the gloom and the fear as a way to kind of wake people up. What I have seen, and dare I say, I have the ability to grow and expand. What I have seen over the past week is that, when you're talking about Biden's vision of saving the soul of the nation versus Kamala's freedom, right? Connected to Beyonce, like when we're talking about the idea of weird versus fascist, do you know what people grab onto? The weird fucking message. It's weird that Donald Trump hugs the American flag, right? It's weird that they have this obsession with wanting to be in doctors' rooms with women, right? Like, it's weird that you want to register, have like you said, Mary, a menstrual registration. Like, the stuff that they're talking about is fucking weird, right? Like, we know that it's cruel. We know that it's disturbing. But you also need to show people, like, wait a minute, this is not normal. And I think that us also using, trying to categorize it as not normal hasn't worked in our favor either, right? Because we all have different understandings of normal. But when we're talking about weird shit, weird cool versus weird crazy, people really understand the difference between in weird crazy and weird cool. And their shit is crazy.
Yeah. And, Brian, quickly, because Waj will not be reclaiming his time because we need to get to something else quickly before the show ends. Jen Rubin's point is that people wrote off Hitler and Mussolini by claiming they were buffoons. I don't think this is what's happening here. We're not saying that, they're jokes and we shouldn't take them seriously. In fact, I think we've all been saying for years, take this seriously. Stop translating what he said so that it's less terrifying, right? So I think there's a way to thread this needle and say the weirdness is one of the problems. The weirdness is one of the dangers. The weirdness is one of the many, many, many reasons you do not want to give these people power.
How about the fact that Donald Trump's a criminal? Can I start there?
Okay, but what I'm saying is,
I know
yeah,
what you're saying, and I
but we're
agree
not
with
trying to drown anything out. We just need
No.
as many arrows in our quiver,
I
an
like,
Olympic
but
reference as possible.
I think it's appearance versus reality. It's not what Harris or Walt said. It's how the audience reacted to it and used it. And to Jen Rubin's point, if we simply write them off as dangerous, then you look at Hitler and write him off as goofy, write him off as whatever, and then
I don't
you
think
minimize
anybody's
that.
doing that, though.
I don't. No, I don't.
Okay.
But pragmatically, I understand the concern. Pragmatically,
Yeah.
the audience has to hear a prescription to the problem. So to Jen's point, it's not enough just to say that they're weird. At the end of the day, tell me why they're weird and how you're going to combat it. Because most of the voters I've spoken with, like I'll tell you, an Arizona voter said, look, I'm looking for a reason to vote. I don't want to vote for Donald Trump. Yeah, he's weird. He's a criminal. I'm looking for a reason to vote for Democrats. Give me the reason. So it's not just enough to say that they're weird. It's what, unfortunately, the Biden administration, what I criticized them for 4 years, was their inability to communicate effectively what it is that they've done. And what Harris has to do is to effectively communicate what it is that differentiates them from and why the people who voted for Trump should vote for her. And I think if she does that, then we're fine. You can use weird all you want as an arrow in your quiver, but at the end of the day, please tell these people why you're better and why you're more effective.
I think they're doing that. And again, remember, we're not even 2 weeks out. It's astonishing.
We haven't even reached the Democratic convention yet.
Yes. No, but I'm saying she's been the candidate for like 8 days.
Yeah.
So it's all going to happen. I think the convention is going to be monumental. Okay, in other news, I don't know about you guys. I have been watching the Olympics because it brings me joy. We've got just stunning, like there aren't words to describe somebody like a Simone Biles or some of these other gymnasts and oh my God, the track and field and the pommel horse dude and I'm terrible with names, but you know what I'm talking about. So I have been watching surfing, which I've never done before. I've been watching water polo along with Flavor Flav because it's a thing we do now. And the surfing is taking place in French Polynesia, which is almost 10,000 miles from Paris. And it is one of the most, by the way, a site where they surf is called a wave. Didn't know that. So it's probably one of the top 3 most dangerous places to surf on the planet. And it has just been spectacular. I want to show you this picture because look at this. Okay. This is Gabriel Medina, Brazil. That photograph was taken by Jerome Bruyere. Now, this was a critical wave. His ride was epic. He got a 9.9 out of 10. And this was his exit from the wave. The guy literally went over the back of the wave and landed and went flying through the air in that position and it has been the highest scoring ride of the entire event so far. And we're not even at the medal rounds yet.
And that's not photoshopped, folks.
That is not photoshopped. I saw it with my own eyes. I wish I had the video because it was just unbelievable. So highly recommend you watch the surfing. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you surf. At least not at, I can't pronounce it, Tahihopo or something. Forgive me, I mangled that. But it translates as, the name of this village translates as the Wall of Skulls, which doesn't actually refer to the waves, but it should, because I'm telling you, this stuff is just absolutely insane. And these athletes, like every time I see the Olympics, I am just blown away by human potential. And just like, it's sort of how I feel when I see an extraordinary concert or something, like what human beings are capable of. Let's get back to that, please. Let's stop. Because not only are these people weird in a MAGA, creepy, off-putting way, in a dangerous way, they also hate creativity, and they hate art, and they hate human achievement. I don't know if you've forgotten this, but I never will. The way they attacked Simone Biles at the last Olympics. I mean, these people hate everything. And we want to be in service to and in support of human achievement. We want to celebrate it, and we want to make it possible for people to achieve at the highest levels, which is what these Olympians do. So let's have that kind of world. Anyway, thank you all so much for being here. I'm so happy to be back with you. Jen Rubin, Waj Ali, Brian Karam, Danielle Moody, Jen Taub, Mercedes O'Brien, thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to all of you for watching. We could not have do this without you. We would not do this without you. It would be a little weird probably if we did. But this was fantastic. And we will be back tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern with Morning Jet. Tomorrow's Wednesday, right? Okay, at 2 o'clock. I mean, geez, time means nothing. 2 o'clock Eastern, we've got Legal Nerds, and 7 p.m. Eastern, we've got Ali Samarco's America Show. And the Nerds and I will be back Thursday at 12 noon. In the meantime, please. Oh, wait. No, I almost forgot. Please subscribe. We're really trying to grow here. It doesn't cost anything. It just means you're going to get alerted to all of the new shows that are dropping. Like the episode, share it with people whom you think might like it, or even especially with people whom you think might hate it, because we're trying to expand our audience. Anyway, thank you all so much. We'll see you soon. In the meantime, please stay safe and be kind. Bye.